Hey there. So the other day I shared this story or this post over on Instagram encouraging coaches to consider getting offline and establishing themselves within their community, talking to real people, participating in local events, maybe hosting local workshops and inviting people to experience your work. And it got a lot of really positive reception. And so I just wanted to record a quick video to tell you more about how I kind of took this journey myself, because everything changed for me when I started showing up locally. And if you're like, but how do you do that? I want to offer you some ideas. So a little bit of background. I was certified originally as a coach back in 2012. So it's been almost 10, 11 years now. And at the time, there was no business advice. It was purely just a program to teach us a framework of understanding the human condition and how to help people navigate thoughts and feelings. And I was really excited to start working with people using this new skill set. But like you, I imagine, I was sitting there every day looking around like, well, where are the clients? How do I find people? I've let people know that I'm a coach, but there aren't people knocking down my door. So what next? So in that moment of kind of confusion and a little bit of urgency, I was marketed at very heavily to join programs to figure out how to build an online business. And one of those programs was called B School. I think it's still around. And I was like, I guess this is the answer. I guess this is what coaches do, is we become a coach and then we have to build an online business so that we can start coaching. And that pulled me down a rabbit hole of overwhelm and confusion and feeling like I had to do all of this stuff before I could start coaching. Looking back now, I realize that to be really successful in the online space, you have to be able to answer questions confidently that we oftentimes don't have the answer to until we've done a lot of coaching. So it's like this really weird catch-22. So this went on for a year or two. I joined a number of other programs where I was like, what's the answer? How do I figure out all these pieces online so that people will start signing up for discovery calls with me? And it was at that time, probably 2013 or 14, that I read the book Prosperous Coach. Now, there are lots of different conversations about Prosperous Coach. I found it particularly helpful primarily because what it showed me was that there was a way to establish a coaching practice built on relationship building and conversations. That was my biggest takeaway. And also as a result, I started to connect with other people in that space who were teaching and mentoring coaches on how to get out into the world and actually start connecting with people. So one of those coaches that I worked with, his name is John Morgan. I will never forget, during one of our sessions, I was like, I really want to host this workshop, and there's this really cool cafe near me, but I'm kind of nervous about approaching the owner. And through his help and encouragement, I was like, okay, I'm going to reach out and ask her. And I sent the email off. She was very kind. She was like, yes, come host your workshop in my cafe on Wednesday mornings. And that really marked the beginning of me showing up locally and having something that I could invite people to. That was like the key, is what can I create? What can I take control over? What can I plan and have on the calendar that I can invite people to? It's not paid. It's a chance for me to refine my work and my point of view, to show up every week, to know what I'm going to teach and talk about. And that became this series of free workshops every Wednesday at 10 called Conscious Talks. And the reason I called it Conscious Talks is because it was at a cafe called Conscious Fork. So that was one of the first things that I did. Likely around that same time, I started looking for local networking groups. Now, networking kind of has a really weird rap, but there's some awesome groups out there where professional men, women, people, humans are getting together to talk about what it is that they do and to share their stories and to practice to practice answering the question, like, so what is it you do? So I found one, and they had this monthly lunch, and it wasn't like an exorbitant fee to join, but I signed on and I started going to these monthly lunches. And here's the benefit of doing something like that. One, you're going to have to answer that question a lot. So what do you do? I think a lot of us spend time imagining our answers, practicing our answers, workshopping, filling out worksheets to figure out our answer to that question. The best way to get comfortable like responding to that question is to be asked it many times. So when you go to these networking events, perhaps the reason that you're going is that so 5, 10 new people are going to shake your hand and say, so what is it you do? And you're going to have to answer them. So that's the first thing that happens there. You start to get to know people. You start to become known to people, right? Every time you go, they're like, oh, hi. And they ask you how you're doing, and they're asking you what you're working on, and you're doing the same. Cool little connections start to form. I met a number of people at those lunches who then invited me to host workshops for their communities and their audience. So that's another thing that you can really start looking for that is a really great way to start getting yourself involved with and connected to the people who are already around you. Another thing that I did was try and connect with local businesses that I thought would be great for hosting a workshop. So I got to know the owner of a couple yoga studios. I introduced myself to a woman who ran this cafe that had a very kind of cool community vibe to it. You know, a lot of those people who are working on projects like that love the opportunity to collaborate and bring value and interest to their space. And so if you can come up with like a 60-minute, very simple, straightforward, but helpful workshop, you can go pitch that to different places, and they are more than likely going to add you to their calendars or be willing to put a little flyer up and let their audience know that you're going to be hosting this conversation. A final thing that I want to share is, as I got to know other people in the community, especially just those community members who were interested in what it is that I was doing, is they would offer to host workshops in their living rooms with me, with their friends, because they had either come to one of my free workshops that I was doing, or by word of mouth, they're like, oh, I hear you're doing this really interesting thing. And I was like, yeah, I've got this workshop that I love hosting. I'm happy to host it for you. Like, if you want to invite your friends over and just provide some snacks and drinks, like that's all I'm asking for. And I did that multiple times. And what it did was, again, it just further integrated me into the community. I became seen and known for this work that I was doing, and people expressed interest in coaching together. I was lucky to have a space where I could invite people in person to connect for discovery calls. As I started working with people in longer partnerships, we would do in-person sessions. If you don't have that space personally, there's likely somewhere locally that you could use for in-person session meetings. I started hosting walk-in talks, right? So I would meet people for walks. I would host local hikes. I live around a number of trails. And so I would, let people know, hey, I'm hosting this hike if you want to come and hike together. And I would kind of plan out a cool, activity for what we were going to do when we were hiking. I hosted like a coach and dine event where I paired up with this woman who was opening up this really cool community cafe space. And we just put a date on the calendar and we both started inviting people. It was called Coach and Dine. Yeah, I share all of this not to toot my own horn, but to give you ideas. Steal all of this. If I've shared something that you're like, oh, I could start doing that, go do it. Everything that I'm putting out here is to help you start taking action in your coaching practice. And if any of the ideas or things that I've experimented with light you up in some way, what could your first step be? Oftentimes, it's getting a date on the calendar, either scheduling it yourself or finding something to attend and saying yes and RSVPing. But I just wanted to share this with hopes that it helps you maybe break free from the overwhelm that can be like establishing an online business and the story that you have to do that before you can start talking to people. You've got people all around you. You have a community, you have a network, you have gatherings where you can start showing up and participating. Start participating. And I recognize this might not be for everybody. You might live in a particular location where you don't have those kinds of opportunities, but don't dismiss it. Don't dismiss it immediately. Go on Facebook and search for things happening in your zip code. Look on Nextdoor, look on Meetup. There are things happening. Check out the library. Is there a chamber of commerce? Ask people if they're participating in community groups of some kind, and get out there and start connecting with real people. Practice being seen, practice becoming known, practice talking about what you do, practice inviting people to experience it, practice hearing no, practice introducing yourself in different ways, practice running different workshops. It all starts to add up. And on the other side of that, you're going to have people who are going to say, this is really awesome. I could use your help. Can we talk about that? Anyway, I hope you find these things helpful. Thanks for being here. Share your comments and questions down below. Wherever you're watching this, I'd love to know what you think. And yeah, talk soon.